Hello, and welcome to the Ascendant Art Podcast, where we are on a search for art that is ascending above the mainstream. This is Mike, your host with Catalytic Comics, here with co-host Joey from Keeper's Cairn and Vinny from Little Chad Comics. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Better than Joey, since this is Cowboy Bebop Netflix week.
Yeah, I'm not doing so good.
Yes, indeed. I've seen whole memes dedicated to the concept of the original anime versus the Netflix adaptation, and it appears to be this one is right on track for just completely ruining the basic purpose and intention of these stories being told. But as always, as the host, it is my job to not know what's going on so I can ask the questions. And so let's start with the most basic question of all. Please explain to me Cowboy Bebop.
I'm going to pass off this question right to Joey because I know that he's going to have more fun with that. I'll just say that it's one of my favorite late 90s anime series, and it's for only lasting one season. It made probably one of the most lasting impacts of any anime show. And with that, we'll let Joey go.
You know, and the whole one season thing, that was not uncommon for animes at the time. 26 episodes and it's a wrap was kind of the standard for a while there, with like several different series. But Cowboy Bebop is basically a futuristic kind of sci-fi, got elements of Western, a little bit of film noir, several different kind of things all amalgamated into one. But it's basically about a ship called the Bebop and the cowboys who are essentially interstellar bounty hunters throughout the solar system, which is, our solar system. Mars is kind of the most advanced, prosperous of the different planets. Earth is a fucking mess. It's just been almost completely destroyed.
Popular theory of the 90s, yep.
Yeah, it's kind of a ruin, but there's still people living there, but it's like the ghetto of the solar system, if you will. And
So it's clearly set in the canon with Wall-E.
Yeah, kind of. Except for they didn't so much just, waste all their planet's resources. There was apparently a gate accident that caused massive destruction on the planet. And the gates are these things that they use to kind of jump into like hyperspace and fast travel from one planet to the other. So a flight from Mars to Earth would be like a 20-minute thing because of these gates. But they had some accidents along the way, but that's kind of side story. The main thing is that they're bounty hunters who basically, hunt down the scum of the galaxy, capture them, and turn them over to the ISSP, which is like the Interstellar Solar Police or something like that. You've got Spike Spiegel, who's pretty much the main character.
Yep.
He's got his whole backstory of being loosely involved with the Mars Syndicate, but he put that life behind him and became a bounty hunter. Then you've got Jet Black, who used to be ISSP Special Forces, but he put that all behind him and became a bounty hunter. And then along the way, they meet Faye Valentine, who doesn't remember who she was. She was taken out of cryosleep at one point, and she doesn't know how long she was in cryosleep. She doesn't know who she was or anything. She was basically woken up so that she could be scammed. And so she becomes kind of a thief slash gambler slash she cheats at cards really good, bit of a femme fatale. And eventually she joins the crew. And then the last person to join the crew is Ed, who is a bit of a quirky hacker girl. She doesn't so much hunt the bad guys like the others, but she gets them all their intel. She goes on the internet and does the deep dives and finds the people. She helps in her way. And they have a dog, like a Welsh corgi named Ein, who is like a super smart dog.
Yeah, usually you get like trios and quintets, and so it sounds like each one has their own motivations, each one has their reasons, and at the end of the day, they're all going to have kind of their different adventure all brought together under this bounty hunter context. So that on its own already sounds like an interesting story. And I mean, I've seen some of the artwork, so now this is just adds to my list of like things I need to go watch to become more cultured. But it seems to be that, hey, since it was such a popular and influential anime, like, why don't we give it a nice update? And of course, because it's Netflix, why don't we do a live adaptation, right? Like, and what is there a problem specifically with actors, or do you think it's just the way from some of the scenes I've seen, is it more just the way that they decided to do these scenes?
Well, the no spoilers answer is the actors didn't screw this up so much as the writers. The writers are really the problem on this one. Like, I honestly felt that John Cho, despite being kind of too old for the part, like, did a really good job kind of bringing Spike Spiegel to life in a live action setting. The other guy, he played Jet Black, and I mean, I thought he did a great job with Jet Black, but I did notice that on more than one occasion, Netflix, much like Disney, could not resist the opportunity to tokenize the black guy. Specifically,
Mustafa
a whole
Shakir.
scene. Yeah, there's specifically a whole scene where Jet is talking about bidets and how wonderful they are, thinking that they're like water-powered foot massagers.
Right.
And Jet was supposed to be probably the smartest person on Bebop other than the dog. But they wanted to make him the dumbass, so then Spike has to explain to him that bidets are actually to clean your ass.
Well, that is not. Yeah, I mean, if you watch the old original anime, yeah, Jet Black is basically like the engineer, the guy who keeps things running. You know, the guy who
Oh no, they
fixes.
took that away from him. He hires a girl to do that now.
Really?
Then she sleeps with Faye.
Full disclosure, I have not been able to bring myself to sit through that Netflix adaptation. I've heard enough that I just didn't want to taint my recollection of.
I suffered through every single episode.
How many episodes was it?
10.
That
And they're
was
like
standard
40
Netflix.
minutes apiece, I think.
So the original anime
Wow.
was only like 22, 23-minute episodes. So, and that was what, a 26 episode season? So
Yeah, well, and
500-600 minutes. Yep.
On top of that, if you watch the Netflix adaptation, it only takes you about, I think, 5 or 6 episodes into the anime. Anyone who's seen the anime knows the scene in the church. The first time Spike and Vicious face off in the church.
Okay.
That's all the farther that the adaptation goes.
So you're saying in about, I just did some quick math. At 40 minutes or so an episode, they only got through 5 of the 26 episodes by having like triple the time.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling that you're indicating that they didn't really add anything of value to the storytelling. I actually, as an example of something where it was a remake that was shot for shot, but they added a couple layers that were actually good. My wife really liked Beauty and the Beast, as most women of her age did. And so we went and saw the new Beauty and the Beast, live action one that they put out a couple of years ago. And they added in a couple things that made it, I think, a lot better. First is the backstory for when the prince gets turned into the Beast. They did it in a scene where he was throwing a gala party, and all the other servants participated and laughing and mocking the witch that cast the spell. Because one of the things that was always a problem, if you go back to the first Beauty and the Beast, was like, why would this witch punish the entire castle of people? That seems kind of wrong.
Yeah,
But
because
in this
apparently it was
case-
just the prince who snubbed her. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of like, that's really messed up. But in this case, they brought everyone in, so it's like, okay, that makes sense. They were all kind of in on making him a terrible person and supporting his terrible choices, so they were part of the punishment. And then they also added a backstory for Belle on why her dad left, Paris, because it was Joey will be a fan. It was a plague storyline where the mother passed away in a plague outbreak. And that's why the father was so out of it, because he was just damaged after having seen that happen when she was so little.
Just wanted to leave it all behind.
Yep, and it was those two elements actually really added good layers to the storytelling of that story, right? So I appreciate it. Like, even though it was basically a shot for shot remake, it added depth, and I actually enjoyed the extra stuff. But it sounds like Cowboy Bebop went the other direction and just was busy tearing down some of the characters that were so beloved.
I mean, I will caveat, I want to get into specifics now, so we will be heading into spoiler territory at this point, for those of you who believe that you can spoil something that is, in essence, rotten from the get-go. But there are some comparisons, because they take a lot of stuff from the anime, and they try to incorporate it into this. And some of it, I'm going to admit this, some of it is done very well. Others falls flat on its fucking face, and others still... They changed specifically for purposes of an agenda, as far as I'm concerned.
One of those cases where they added constraints that really just did not need to be there.
No,
Well, we've
several
given
cases where they decided that they were going to take away Spike's victory and give it to one of the females.
Yeah.
Not even joking. That happened multiple times during what is essentially the climax. But going back, there's a specific part where at one point some eco-terrorists get a hold of this virus that can basically act on the 2% of your DNA that you share with primates and turn you back into a primate. That's what happened in the anime.
Right.
Apparently, they felt that in the show that wouldn't work. So instead, the eco-terrorists got a hold of spores that would make you turn into a tree from the inside out.
Okay.
Which was much grosser and more painful looking. But the plan is that they're going to hit this planet with it and turn everybody into trees. They were doing something similar in the anime, but in the anime, they launched these missiles while they were in a hyperspace gate. So while they were traveling through hyperspace, they launched the missiles so that the missiles couldn't be as easily tracked or manipulated, because the only people who could affect them are the people who were in that hyperspace tunnel.
Along with them, yep.
So Spike and Faye both try to take those missiles out in the anime, and unfortunately they take some of them out, but not all of them out, and they have to make a mad rush to clear the gate before the ISSP shuts the gate off so that the missiles can't leave hyperspace. So basically, they did not succeed in taking out the missiles, but they managed to escape before they got locked in a hyperspace gate. In the show, instead, they launched them from the planet, and the missiles are coming back to the planet to hit the planet. And Spike and Jet are on the ground going, well, we're fucked. It was a great run. Cool. And then Faye, in a selfless act of personal sacrifice with her ship, crashes into the missiles and saves the boys from this terrible fate of being turned into a tree.
Now you've got multiple issues here, because wait, they launched it off the planet back onto the planet. That already makes you ask, why? If they're already on the planet, why don't you just drive them around to key spots and blow them up?
Well, the other thing is that, and Mike, you can be the guinea pig since you didn't watch it. He was talking about a co-equal attempt between the man and the woman to try to stop these things, right? It wasn't like only one could do it, right?
Right.
But now we've changed it, so it's not like we took a moment where they were both trying and had and didn't succeed, right? It was an anti-Mary Sue moment, right? You had a flaw, right? You lost. That's a big L for both of them, that they weren't able to actually succeed in what they were doing.
And
but
what do you do now that you actually lost, right?
Yeah.
And how do you recover from that? And they do, right? But now instead of it being okay, you actually had a loss and you recover from it, it's what we need is just a moment where everyone steps back and realizes how awesome Mary Sue is, right? And she's going to save us with her awesomeness.
It's not the first time, and it won't be the last either.
Yeah.
Because now we're going to get into the big one. And Vinny, you'll hate this too.
All right, here we go.
I already dislike what you just told me about that part.
If you remember the iconic scene where Spike goes to rescue Faye, who has been taken captive by the Syndicate.
Yeah, he's going. This is with Vicious. Yeah.
Before you say it, can I make a guess here?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Because you remember, pretty soon we're going to be releasing a graphic of the Zero's journey instead of the hero's journey. Whereas in the hero's journey, you get to the inmost cave and you go through the ordeal where you are transformed. Instead, that's the point where the Zero simply realizes their awesomeness. And then the simp realizes her awesomeness. And then the villain realizes her awesomeness. And then everybody realizes her awesomeness. So if I had to guess, Faye doesn't really need saving in this case.
No. Faye never even gets captured in this version.
Of course, because of her awesomeness.
They didn't want Faye to seem like a damsel in distress at any given time during this entire series. So instead, they created a magical MacGuffin. Jet Black, who was not a married man in the anime,
right,
is now a divorced man who had a daughter with a girl. And a lot of his motivation is the daughter. So instead of kidnapping Faye, they go and they capture Jet's daughter, and then they call Jet and say, Jet, you will give us Spike or we'll kill your daughter. And then Jet gets very angry because apparently this is also in the show the first time he realizes that Spike is former Syndicate. And he punches Spike in the stomach, throws Spike in the trunk of the car, and goes to give Spike to them. And obviously Faye, who is just such a good and honorable person who can do no wrong and that has no moral issues, despite being, in the anime, her being probably the most morally gray of any of them, says she can't be involved in this. and she bugs out. She just rolls out of there. So then Spike and Jet get captured in their heroic attempt to rescue the daughter.
And Faye saves them both, of course.
Faye saves them both. Now, in the anime, what happens is Spike walks his happy ass right through the front door of that church and kills everybody.
Kills everybody. It's
everybody.
Epic. It's almost like
Yep.
if you've seen Kingsman, when Colin Firth does the church massacre.
I was going to say, it's not exactly the same, but I'm also thinking of like Boondock Saints, when those guys go in looking for that guy.
Instead, in this version, Spike and Jet are tied to pillars in the church, and Faye flies in with her ship and kills everybody, and then shoots the pillar to free Spike. And Spike carries the little girl out because they broke Jet's leg, so Jet can't really walk real well. So Spike carries the little girl out, and they load everybody up into Faye's ship so she can fly them all to safety. And before Spike gets in, he goes, "There's something else I got to do." And he goes back in for the final confrontation with Vicious. It gets worse, Vinny.
Because we already know, because once you have ideology writing the show, you already know what they're going to do.
So, I mean, this is already really bad because Spike is supposed to be a badass. I mean, and you've already neutered him by taking the church massacre out.
You took away that victory, which was a huge victory.
We got to take away the fight with Vicious too, I'm guessing, and give that to one of the female characters as well.
Okay, to give you some idea, and they even use the lines from this part, but to give you some idea, in the anime, after Spike kicks everyone's ass, he goes upstairs and he finds Vicious, and they have a very short confrontation. It's quick. Like, Vicious tries to hit him with the sword, Spike blocks it with the gun, Spike tries to take some shots while keeping the sword at bay, and then Spike falls down, Vicious goes to do the thrust through the chest, Spike pulls the gun around and puts the gun to the chest, and they're both like in the old Mexican standoff. Like, they're stalemated right there in front of the stained glass. It's beautiful cinematography. And Vicious says, "Do you have any idea what you look like right here in this moment?" And Spike says, "What's that?" And Vicious says, "A ravenous beast. The same blood runs through both our veins," and goes through this whole thing. And Spike says, "I bled all that blood away a long time ago." And then Vicious goes, "Then why are you still alive?" And he stabs Spike, and Spike shoots him, and they're both hurt. But Vicious wheels right back around, grabs Spike by the face, and chucks him out the window right through the stained glass. And it's an amazing scene, just absolutely amazing. And when that happens, it starts playing the music, and you see Spike falling, and he starts having flashbacks. And you've seen some of these flashbacks all the way through because it gives you kind of the backstory of what's driving these people. But then Vicious turns away from the window and sees a whole bunch of grenades with the pins out. And as Spike's falling, Faye swoops in and catches him with her zip craft, if I remember correctly. Either that or the Bebop does, one of the two. But he gets caught and saved. And you see the entire window, what's left of it, just explode. And you don't know what happens to Vicious. You didn't see him die. Right. So that's the first major encounter between Vicious and Spike. In this, they do all that again, and it even ends with, "And why are you still alive? Shoot, stab." And then Vicious and them, they have a little bit more fighting, and then Vicious grabs the gun and points the gun at Spike, and then Julia shoots Vicious.
Did you just say Julia?
Julia shoots Vicious.
Why is Julia there?
Because apparently she's married to Vicious in this version.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and Vicious, let me explain something to you. Vicious has zero agency in this entire series. He is actually like a paranoid, psychotic child who Julia manipulates into doing dumb shit.
But Julia shouldn't even be there.
No, she shouldn't, but she is, and she
shoots. If I remember right,
she shoots Vicious. And then she says to Spike, "Why didn't you come to me? If you were still alive, why didn't you come to me?" And he goes, "I didn't think you'd want to see me. He told me you chose him." And then she explains that like he should have known better and blah, 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 because it's always the man's fault. And then she shoots him and he goes flying out the window.
But she's supposed to be dead.
No, in this one, not only is she not dead, she shoots Spike, who goes flying out the window.
Because if I remember right,
she dies in like the last episode of the anime.
They show her having a flashback of her ghost, basically, in that scene. It was a really important part of the setup is
Yeah.
is his guilt,
But
right? So
but basically
Yeah.
what happens is she shoots him instead of Vicious throwing him out the window. It knocks him out the window. I'm not kidding. She's the one who sends him out that window. So Vicious is now robbed of that. Spike is robbed of his victory.
so
And then
Vicious is dead now, definitively.
no. She locks him in a room in their mansion, I think, and says, "Well, you're the head of the syndicate now, but for that reason no one can ever see your face. So I guess I'll be your voice." And she's basically in charge of the syndicate now.
There's so many things wrong with this.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's one of those cases, if you guys know the history of Troll 2, that famous worst movie ever made, it turned out that when they were naming that movie, they tagged it on to another movie named Troll that had nothing to do with it. But they said because the concept for Troll 2 was so weak, maybe we can get more sales if we tag it on to this other IP, because we're not really doing anything with that one anyway.
That was the movie where they were in Nilbog, right? And it was goblins
Nilbog.
spelled back. And it was about, and they were goblins.
It was about vegetarian goblins and the Stonehenge stone. I actually watched it. It actually is kind of fun. But I just remember this idea of hey man, this thing won't sell on its own. So let's just tag it on to this other IP because no one's gonna notice. And it became famously the worst movie ever made. But I'm just getting kind of that same vibe here that this really isn't the Cowboy Bebop story, but it's more like they did a fan fiction of it, and they're like, well, we're just going to attach it to the IP because it would never sell if we just tried to tell the story itself.
They took the whole thing and just kind of took Cowboy Bebop, put it in a blender, just pushed the button once or twice real quick, dumped it back out, and then just started putting pieces together.
It's pretty clear. It seems like Netflix has basically a little appropriation board. Look what they did with He-Man, right? This is exactly what they did with He-Man. It's like they're taking the exact same story beats where they're saying we need to remove the male lead that everybody finds beloved, replace him and give all the W's that the male lead had to the female lead, and find ways to subtly or not so subtly emasculate the male lead throughout the entire show to make sure that everybody gets the point that she don't need no man.
Oh, Vinny, it's worse than that. I didn't tell you about the other thing you just reminded me of. They have a scene when Spike doesn't like Faye very much at first, which I could see how they could see that, but Spike actually didn't care as much about Faye at the beginning of the anime. They had kind of fun, witty banter going back and forth, and then she kind of just joined them, and they were like, what the fuck? Really? But they went with it. In this one, Spike doesn't like her, and Jet goes out to do his thing and tells them that they need to do something else. And they have a scar battle where they talk about their scars, because in this one...
so they pull a Lethal Weapon, was it 3? Lethal Weapon 3, the Rene Russo, Mel Gibson, scar
because
off.
in this live action adaptation, Faye was already a bounty hunter. She didn't join them and start hunting bounties. She wasn't a gambler / thief / con artist or anything before she joined them. She was already a bounty hunter.
What?
And the best bounty hunter, because
so why does she join them?
Well, when they were talking about the people that they got along the way, right? Faye said she got this one guy, and Spike is like, no, there's no way you got that guy. No. And then she proved she got that guy, and then Spike starts fangirling over her like, oh my God, you got that guy? Mad respect. You're awesome. You're like the best.
Dude.
And she's like, yeah, I know. If you stick with me, kid, you might be a great bounty
hunter. This is
100%
the Zero's journey.
I'm not kidding you.
The simp realizes her awesomeness.
Yeah.
They made Spike Spiegel a simp.
They really did in that scene.
Oh, my brain hurts.
Yeah.
But my heart hurts more. I mean, I really liked Masters of the Universe growing up. I was in the exact right age group for it to hit really hard, for He-Man to be like my favorite cartoon kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And what they did to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Revelation bothered me so much to my core, because it was, it's when it's something that you have that personal relationship with, and they clearly shit on your childhood. And I know that term gets used a lot, because people say that a lot, but it happens a lot. I feel for, Cowboy Bebop was one that I really enjoyed, but I was a little bit past the age where it really like hit perfect for me. I feel like people who watched it who were basically younger teens, it was like it was the epic anime intro kind of thing that everybody in that era really loved. I loved
Mm-hmm.
Cowboy Bebop, but it wasn't the thing. But I can just picture myself if I was one of those guys who was like, Cowboy Bebop is like there is like a top 3 anime for so many people because it's what they watch to really turn to start loving anime. And to see, well, I haven't watched it, but to hear what they've done, number one, it makes me glad I didn't watch it because my recollection of it is now still pure. But number two, it's just so terrible to see these people who get budgets, they get money, they get to play in the fantasy realm of the stuff that we could only dream of being able to write stories in and redo and have fun with. And Cowboy Bebop, if they were going to make a live action, they could have done like storylines set in the universe and done something independent and different so that it was in that vein, but not trying to like shit on what happens. And they didn't. They made it, they consciously, from the choices Joey's talking about, they consciously chose, and it had to be conscious. I'm tired of people saying it just happened. This is things that they had to think about and plan with design.
Like how you don't have a focus group that goes, people are gonna not like that because X, Y, or Z, or even just people on the cast that know the original material that would go, yeah, your fans aren't gonna like that because of X, Y, or Z. No, they got that, and they're just like, oh, fuck it, let it play. We
Yeah.
don't care.
Well, I think it's not just we don't care. There actually is a particular philosophy here behind what we call just the social justice philosophies. And this is the concept of what they would call redistributive justice. So pretty much like, right, academia right now is built on this concept of everything that happened before their particular favorite turning in time was just a period of everything was dark, everything was terrible. People were terrible in every possible way. Don't check anything that happened before 1968. And because of that, it's like, well, how do we make everything fair? It's like, well, because there was just thousands and thousands of years of oppression, right? If this is like some scale on the balance, we need to do redistributive justice, which means we must specifically make the people we declared oppressors to be less while declaring these other people to be more. So it's really the only way for us to be equal is to deliberately push down anything that was once considered good. Right. Now, that's the social justice side. I've also come to see it in one other way, too, that if you are trying to build some other world out of whole cloth where everybody is just kind of a faceless, soulless economic unit, they can't have culture. Because the thing is, like, culture and cultural discovery means that you were searching for truth. But if you're trying to dictate truth, then any discovery process will necessarily go against what you're trying to do. So in a sense, I do think that there are some people who are in a revolving door between academia, government, investment firms, and entertainment who they carry this philosophy of we've got to remake the world a certain way. And as long as there is culture, it's in our way. And so they know what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose. And you're right, they're willing to lie about what they're doing the whole way as long as you'll believe it.
Well, and like I guess femme fatales aren't allowed anymore because
we can't have actually powerful
Faye.
women.
Well, and that's the thing. Like Faye was like formidable in her own right in several different ways in the anime, but it wasn't that she was a fighter.
Yeah, but
and
Faye
the very
used
first thing they do
all
with
the
Faye,
tools she had.
Yeah, but the very first thing they do with Faye in this live action is she gets into a knife fight with Spike.
She should be dead.
Yeah, like Spike isn't using a knife, but she's like rolling around kicking his ass, countering all his moves, like holding her own against Spike Spiegel, which should not happen. and they turned her into like the kid sister of the crew. Like she's not Faye. And I don't necessarily blame the actress about that, even though based on everything she's responded to thus far, she seems like a right bitch. But if that's how they decided to direct her and that's how the character was written, that's not entirely her fault. She could just be a little more fucking gracious about it, is all I'm saying. And then Ed.
She did not help. Wait, what? Ed is in it?
She's in the after credits scene.
Ed is just never going to translate to live action.
It doesn't. And my thought process was, okay, if you want to do Ed in a live action, you kind of dial it down a little.
You have to. You can't do that
And
kind of
you make
character
her
in
kind of
real.
like a quirky hacker that's kind of in her own little world and doesn't really give a shit about what's going on in the rest of the world. That's about as close as you're going to get, right? No, they took it to 11 and made sure that they're also playing that diversity, equity, and inclusion card, because apparently the kid playing Ed is gender non-binary, which made no fucking sense to me, because the anime goes out of its way to remind you that Ed is a girl on multiple occasions. Ed identifies as a girl on multiple occasions. Ed says Ed's a girl on multiple occasions. The only person who confuses that is her dad, who is also so in his own little world that he can't remember if she's his son or she's his daughter.
Which it sounds like they're just playing that up almost for a comedic effect there, to show like that's how out of the world the guy is.
Yeah, he's crazy. He's a little bit loopy, and she's a little bit loopy too, and that's the thing. And they just latched onto that one little thing about Ed. Like, Ed looks kind of gender neutral. And they changed it, which is apparently okay. But I mean, only if you change it to, not if you change it from.
So Mike, they took away a woman in STEM, is what they did.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. But Mike, so you haven't watched, I think, a ton of anime at this point, so you don't know. There's a very distinct character type in anime, like over the top. Like, these are characters that really only can exist in anime. They do not translate to live action, and there's never really a way to do it right in live action. Ed's one of those characters. Like, if they were going to do,
I think they could have done it. I just think, here's the thing. All the goofy bouncing around and crazy poses and yelling and silly voices, like, you have to dial a lot of that down, yes. But I still think you could have made Ed a quirky hacker who's just kind of socially awkward and is in her own little world. And I even think you could have given her the hand thing that she always does. Like, right before she starts typing, she waves the hands and then just starts going. That would have been fine.
this goes back to what I think. I think they should have just done, if they were going to do a live action thing, that should have just been a offshoot spin-off, like some other crew doing other things in the Cowboy Bebop universe, so that you don't even have to get into those things.
They should have done a prequel where it was just Spike and Jet.
But that's like,
because you don't know how long they've been together.
But that's like 2 men. You can't have that.
Yeah. And none of those other people to fuck it up, apparently, because John Cho and Mustafa, whatever his name was, they did a really good job bringing the characters of Spike and Jet to life. Nobody else did that great a job. The only other person I will say was really good was the guy who they had playing Mad Pierrot. Even though the lady who said what they called him Pierrot, and I was like, it's Mad Pierrot, you dumbasses. It's French. Come on.
Oh, that's personal for you.
Do you remember Mad Pierrot, Vinny?
They weren't in a ton of episodes.
No, he was in one episode. He was the crazy nut job who could fly, was really fat, and had the ablative armor that stopped bullets.
Yeah.
And kicked the ever-loving shit out of Spike.
That's why, yeah, that doesn't happen a lot.
And then summoned him to that old amusement park on an asteroid or some shit. And he goes, "Let's party!" and starts fighting him in the amusement park. But then gets stabbed in the leg at the end and starts crying because he still has the mind of a child. They got a guy to play him. He did a really good job with Mad Pierrot.
Which is a good segue to reminding people that if they are going to go to Netflix and they do search for Cowboy Bebop, they actually have the anime on Netflix now. And if you're going to watch Cowboy Bebop, just watch the anime.
You can also watch it on Funimation if after this travesty you want Netflix to suck a big fat dick. Because I watched it on Funimation.
That's true. I mean,
noted.
Funimation has a lot. Funimation has its own problems, though. They do have a lot of content. Like especially now that they bought Crunchyroll, because Crunchyroll was the other big anime streaming service, and Sony, which owns Funimation, just wrote a fat check to Warner Brothers and bought Crunchyroll. So all animation in basically imported to the US and Canada, and a large chunk of Europe now is run through Sony via Funimation and Crunchyroll. So good stuff. And yet you still have to pay for 2 subscriptions at the moment, which that needs to go away.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But the real answer is go watch the original anime, because the live action sounds like absolute terrible shit that everybody and their mother should avoid.
Yeah, pretty much. If you haven't seen it, watch the anime. If you've seen the anime and you want to watch that, prepare to be disappointed. I mean, it's going to be like just compelling enough that it could keep you watching if you try to ignore the bad. But I would say by episodes 7 or 8, it goes from bad to worse, and then you are talking full on train wreck with cargo containers full of puppies and kittens on fire, going into a black hole and spaghettifying as they do, with
So visually
meteors
compelling.
just exploding into them, and then a dying star collapsing on top of it all simultaneously.
Oh, this is terrible.
What a great visual. That almost sounds like if we've got a Descendant art equivalent to the Ascendant art podcast, like that's going to be our visual for putting on a t-shirt.
The Descendant art, the destruction of the kittens. Oh no.
Containers full of kittens, dude.
Yes, all spaghettifying as they cross the event horizon into
Is
a
this
black
what really
hole.
happened to Schrödinger's cat?
That's right.
Schrodinger's cat is here and there.
I was going to
And
say
everywhere.
because Schrödinger's cat is both the original anime and the Netflix adaptation for Alive and Dead.
Oh God, no. No.
Oh, you just broke Joey. Oh, you can't link them. You can't link them together. It's terrible.
Both Alive and Dead at the same time. But
Now,
but what's funny
you
is
said-
you mentioned about it dragging on though, and how we talked about it was 400 minutes to cover 5 episodes of what would otherwise be like 110. That made me realize too, man. I've heard it elsewhere that Netflix is really geared towards kind of like binge watching a stream of mediocrity with occasional good content thrown in there, and they almost like write stories in that context. Do you think there's a little bit of that also that goes into this? Like they're just dragging it out with just utterly meaningless content because they're looking for a binge watcher who doesn't know what good content is?
I cannot profess to know the mind of an idiot. I mean, I know I've been an idiot many times in my life, but like...
Or an evil automaton for that matter.
I mean, this is my wheelhouse, and yeah, you're right. The story was not told efficiently. It was not told effectively. The characters were all over the place. They did not match up even archetypally with their predecessors in the anime. They're just completely all over the boards with what they are and who they are. I mean, I shit you not, there is a whole episode where at the beginning, Jet is not fixing the ship because apparently he is a man who is incapable of fixing his own ship. And he has this engineer on, and she's telling him all about how he done fucked up and his ship is wrong. And this new, power converter or whatever, which if they had Ray could just be bypassed, but they don't have Ray, so it can't be bypassed.
Of
I
course.
bypassed it.
Yeah, it needs to be replaced. And she's got one in the truck, and Jet's like, well, I'm not going to pay the 6,000 woolongs that you want me to pay when I could go down to the street and get a refurbished one for like $2,000. So you wait here, I'll go get the refurbished one. And then, I shit you not, Faye goes down to make sure she's not, fucking with anything because Jet tells her to. This is the first time she meets this engineer, and the engineer's like,
Yep.
hey, you're pretty hot. And then like, Faye's like, well, I was just coming down here to make sure you weren't stealing anything because Jet seems to think you might want to steal something. And the engineer's like, well, there's nothing on this rig worth stealing anyway, except maybe you. And then they fuck.
What?
Like, what?
So wait.
What?
So if this engineer was a man talking exactly the same way, this would be every form of like toxic masculinity there could be, but because it's a female, suddenly this should be celebrated.
Yep.
So this reminds me of a really funny, this tells you how old it was, funny Saturday Night Live sketch where it was Tom Brady hosting.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be a old sexual harassment training film. And it was him and Fred Armisen were the two guys working in the office. And Tina Fey and Amy Poehler were the women. And, it was like, here's Fred. And Fred just like waves nicely over at Amy, Tina Fey. And Tina Fey picks up the phone to call HR. And they're like, do you see what Fred did? He was unattractive.
Yes.
And is like, here's Tom. And Tom walked right over and he grabs her boob and says, hey, you want to hang out later? And then he just walks away. And they're like, you see, Tom, he was attractive.
I remember that. Be handsome.
I remember that.
Be handsome. Be attractive. Don't be not attractive.
Yes.
So there's another one where Spike was robbed. This is just like the wound that just keeps reopening. Vinny, do you remember the episode where there were all these cultists who were like deleting themselves so that they could upload their brains to the internet?
Yeah.
And like there was this weird like dude on the monitor that was like, free your mind, the body will follow, or that whole crap, right? Do you remember how Faye got really interested in it because she thought maybe it'd help her figure out who she was, because they kind of manipulated her?
Yeah, because Faye's entire character arc was trying to remember.
And then Spike and Jet had to save her because she was going to have her brain deleted.
Yeah.
Wait. I can already guess, because it's the Zero's journey. We're going to flip the whole thing and Faye's going to save them.
Yeah, Spike gets locked in the chair and they can't get him out. So they meet the guy who originally developed the AI that was doing this in the first place. And he said, you got to go destroy the mainframe. It's at this place on Earth. So they fly to Earth real quick. And this is that episode where Faye fucks this engineer that she just met literally 15 seconds prior to this. But like, they literally go to that place and they're trying to destroy the mainframe, but it's behind this bulletproof glass that they can't seem to break through. And even somehow Jet's giant metal bionic arm can't punch through it. But at the beginning of the episode, Faye ordered a railgun. And they all told her, you know, those things are like they're a scam, right? They don't work. And she's like, oh, it will work. It can put a hairpin through a man, or it can put a paperclip through a man's skull from 1,000 yards out, or some. She says some stupid shit like that, right? Well, at the very end, when Jet's trying to bust through this bulletproof glass so that they can shut down this mainframe, destroy this mainframe, she pulls out the railgun. And then the engineer lady goes, will this work? And hands her a hairpin. To which my wife said, if she's a lesbian bull dyke, she's not going to have a hairpin, especially not with hair that short. But okay.
But of course, like they already constructed this.
Yes, they put the hairpin in the railgun and they shoot it. And it goes through the bulletproof glass and blows up the mainframe. And they saved Spike. And they were right and he was wrong.
This makes me so mad.
I think one of you guys made the point earlier. So they also broke the story archetypally. Like, because Faye's archetype, as you're explaining to me, is that this is a character who doesn't know what her origin is, and she's trying to rediscover that. And the whole point of this story, of this particular episode story, was she's getting herself into trouble trying to resolve this issue in the wrong way. And now that fundamental question doesn't get advanced because, or like that part of her character is not advanced because we're not making this about her story and about her self-discovery and like what she goes through to get there. It's now she doesn't even have that story anymore. She's just a Mary Sue.
She still has that story, but in like the anime, she doesn't tell them about that right away. Like she hides that. In the live action, she just goes, yeah, I have amnesia. I don't remember. Apparently this happens if you've been in cryosleep for too long. And they just immediately know. And it's like the anime did such a good job. Remember the missiles that I was telling you about in the hyperspace gate?
Yeah.
Right? When they close the hyperspace gate, Spike and Faye just beat out the missiles and get out the hyperspace gate before it closes entirely. Then a whole bunch of like phantom missiles go flying by and Faye freaks the fuck out and is like, what the hell was that? And that's how you know Faye's not even from their era. It's the first clue you get because Jet's basically like, didn't you take your gate physics? Like, don't you remember gate physics back in high school? Like, objects in hyperspace can be viewed normally from regular space. They just can't be acted upon. And she had no idea about that. And she tried to play it off like she knew, but you knew as the viewer, you knew she didn't know. And that's the first real hint you get that like maybe she was in cryosleep for a really long time.
You know, subtle storytelling details that add depth and layers that as the viewer can appreciate watching it. It's a nice little touch.
Oh, and then the cherry on top, because I think I've hit all the major bullshit that I really didn't like. But the cherry on top, this one's for you, Vinny. At the end of the whole thing, before the Ed scene, which is absolutely awful, but as they get into end credits, Faye leaves and says, this is my chance to find out who I am, because she's found her identikit or whatever, and watched the VHS and identified that area and kind of figured out where she might be from, where she grew up. So she's going, and that's fine, because something like that did happen in the anime. And then Spike shows up after they've saved everybody and the whole battle is ensued and everything else. And Jet tells him, if I ever see you again, I'll kill you. And they part ways.
Why?
Because he was Syndicate and he never told Jet that.
Hmm.
Jet Black says to Spike Spiegel, if I ever see you again, I'll kill you.
This is terrible. Did they watch? I mean, they had to watch to rip off certain stuff, clearly.
Oh, yeah, they ripped off a lot of stuff.
When you hire people who don't like what you're hiring them to remake, it's a problem. It's what's a good example to kind of juxtapose this is Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is run by people who love Karate Kid. Like, I like Karate Kid, but these guys live and breathe Karate Kid. So when they make a continuation of the story, they are knee deep in what I didn't even realize was a very rich mythos for Karate Kid in history, right? And so they make
really
a show.
Build up the lore
Yeah.
real well.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then you start thinking about it, and like, oh, there were 3 movies that were distinct and had characters, and you could build on and do all that kind of thing. And it's so well received. I mean, it's universally well received. As much as anything can universally be well received in 2020, 2021. Like, it might have like 5% negative, which is universal as far as I'm concerned. And you could have had that with these other shows that are beloved fan project. Like if you get the fans on your side, who these are like the early adopters, right? As Steve Jobs used to talk about this when he was bringing out technology, and he was like, you get the early adopters, and these become our emissaries, our evangelizers, right?
I was going to say,
go out and speak out and get people to buy these things.
I was going to say, yeah, that's a like an entrepreneurship 101 even. They call them the early evangelist. And you've got to engage that person. Because you're right, they're the ones who do all the selling.
Exactly, because and then you don't have to pay that person. Like a salesperson, you pay a commission to, or you pay a salary to. But you get someone, and everybody remembers. At least and people our age remembered those first people who bought iPhones, who became devoted to it, like became disciples of Apple, and they were trying to get everybody to buy iPhones, and eventually a lot of people did, right? So these early adopters and are key from a business side, but they're also in fandoms. It's the same concept. It works that way. You get people who are your devoted fan base, and they will go see your movie if you release a movie. These are the people who go see it like 20 times in the theaters, but they will go out and they will tell everybody they know every day for months that you need to see this movie for this reason. You need to go see it. It's amazing. It's the greatest for. And when you lose those people, you're cutting out a big chunk. And I think this is one of the mistakes Netflix makes. They buy these properties or the rights to them because they're like, oh, we have a built-in fan base and then we can expand it. But then they do everything they can storytelling wise to shit on the existing fan base. And so when you lose those people, you can't
grow the fan base.
No, because what they're missing is that these people bring with them a ton of other normie people to the project. They are the people who, they're the gateway for tons of normie people to enjoy it. You can make content that appeals to everybody, but you've got to get right by the fans who love it first.
Yeah. And I think also too, one of the reasons you have to get it right by the fans is because, again, there is something in the story that will activate those people. And just even as you guys are describing it to me, because it is kind of fun, like going into some of these old titles blind and just listening to you guys talk about it, because this is also, I'm learning about how to dissect a title. You can read a comic book or you can watch a movie and you can start to like reverse engineer the story almost to say, okay, here is this character, here are their motivations, this is the archetype. And from that, you can say, okay, here are the challenges they go through and how they interact with the other characters. And same thing here. I'm listening to you guys, and it already sounds like a really cool story of, okay, we've got this criminal organization, and we've got a guy who has repented of it, but he's got ties to the past. You've got a person who doesn't know who she is. And I'm still trying to understand Jet Black's character.
He is the foil to Spike in a lot of ways.
Okay.
He had a falling out with the ISSP because he was he was set up to take a fall as a dirty cop, despite the fact that he wasn't a dirty cop.
So in a sense, like, he is a pretty pure character then. Maybe that's not the way to put it, but like, you can kind of say, okay, you've got the disgraced cop, you've got the reformed criminal,
Yeah.
and you've got the person who doesn't know who she is, and she's got her motivation, and then you mentioned the hacker who's just their own motivation on top of that. And like, it already sounds like an interesting story of like, okay, how is this team gonna work together to accomplish their mission? Right. And also as you described the villains too, right? It's really a great story. I can already tell from that. Whereas this other story,
Well, the villain is the one they fucked up more than anybody. In the anime, Vicious was this cold, kind of emotionless, merciless, cruel monster. But did you guys ever see Van Helsing, right?
Yeah, go on.
I liked Van Helsing, but I hated Dracula in that movie.
Dracula was so terrible in that movie.
Because literally there's a scene where Dracula, talking to his wives, goes, "I feel nothing!" It's like, you sound really angry for someone who feels nothing. And that's kind of what they did to Vicious in the live-action adaptation. He became so emotional, so over the top, so like screaming and yelling and reacting violently to everything. And it's like, that's not Vicious. The reason people were terrified of Vicious was because you didn't know what the fuck he was thinking. Because he always talked in a very just cold monotone. And he would tell you, one day I'm going to kill you.
And you
It's
realized
going to be me.
He was deadly serious when he said it.
Yeah. But no, they just turned him into this like screaming, just emotional, petulant child with daddy issues. And apparently one of the elders is his dad, which was not a thing in the anime. But his whole motivation is, daddy didn't love me enough. Daddy doesn't respect me. I want to kill daddy. Like, that's his whole motivation.
So what it really sounds like, to tie it back to something, because I haven't watched this new version of Vicious. What you're describing is a lot like the first 20 minutes of Face Off and the way Nick Cage was playing Castor Troy. Like, where it was just some over the top, crazy, maniacal, out of control. And everybody who's seen Nick Cage do these performances probably knows what I'm talking about. That is not what Vicious is supposed to be like at all. It completely undercuts what they were going for and the setup between him and Spike Spiegel and their backstory.
And the whole reason Vicious launches the coup in the live action is because Julia told him to. Like, in the anime, Vicious launches a coup because the capos and the elders are trying to make peace with the other syndicates in the solar system. And Vicious is like, we don't need to make fucking peace with anyone. We're the syndicate. They do what we tell them or they die. And so he thinks that the capos and the elders have grown soft and weak and lost their fangs. And so he kills them all and takes over.
Yeah, that's
it's
how it's supposed to be.
It's an in-character motivation that he's like, look, I can get this power. I want this power. I have the capacity, and they don't have the ability to stop me, which that is a very solid villain.
It's they aren't using the power. If they won't use it, I will take it from them.
Exactly. And then the question is like, okay, if they're going to make him a child that gets pushed around by Julia, apparently, it's like, well, did they make Julia a sufficiently dangerous and cunning villain, or is that just one more tokenization as well?
I don't know what they did with Julia. Julia's all over the fucking place in this. Julia in the anime, she was almost just a MacGuffin. Her character is very loosely explored in like the last couple of episodes. But beyond that, she's what motivates Spike. And she is not an active player in the story.
I can tell you why they made the change. So in about I forget, it was almost like 20 years ago now. Gail Simone came to prominence by using the term fridging. And this is something that you may have heard online as a negative, like, it's because it came from a Green Lantern storyline. And his girlfriend is murdered and cut into pieces and put into a refrigerator. And he discovers her body in the refrigerator. And so Gail Simone kind of
Gross.
mentioned that the entire motivation for Kyle Rayner is his girlfriend being fridged. She had no agency, right? It was a thing like, oh, she has no agency. She's just there to motivate the hero to take revenge. So she made it a point. It's a lot like some other people with video games with Anita Sarkeesian, where they were trying to say it was a trope, right? It's a trope that the hero is motivated by these two-dimensional girl characters, right, that don't actually have depth. And I guarantee you that was probably something that came up in the Netflix writer's room for this show, where like, oh, Julia was just like some, she was the fridged girlfriend. Like that's just an artificial motivation for Spike Spiegel. So we're going to flip that on the head. We're going to subvert expectations. And we're going to make sure.
But that's okay. If that is the only pertinence that it has to the story, then that's fine. You know what's even tropier than that is a love triangle where two guys like the same girl, and they had no problems troping the shit out of that one. In the anime, Vicious didn't give two shits about Julia, other than the fact that she was Syndicate property.
But you got to understand that the guys fighting over Julia is actually going to end up being a sign of how excellent and smart and manipulative she was to be able to get both of them to do what she wanted at different times to get what she wanted.
And then also that is a very common female power fantasy as well. Because if you think about it, so many soap operas are written around female mate selection, which is the one has to choose between the bad boy millionaire and the studious billionaire boy, who both want her.
That's true. And sometimes it's a billionaire who's really attracted to the mousy girl who comes to his... I'm kidding. That was 50 Shades of Grey and it made no sense. But
again, female power fantasy there.
You literally just said about twice as much as I knew about it. I knew there was a billionaire. I didn't realize it was a mousy girl. So
well, go watch the trailer, man. It's hilarious. It's got it'll make you laugh. It's just watching. It's one of those things where you can just watch it and see how terrible this movie is. It's a Skinamax movie being made with like a Hollywood budget, and you're like,
50 Shades of Grey, more like 50 Shades of Gay.
I'm sure there was one of those too. Maybe in your viewing habits on the incognito browser.
How dare you? I'd never go incognito.
You want people to find it. You're going to find my browsing history and you're going to be shamed by it.
I want you to know. I want you to see the tentacles.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Okay, Kurt Eichenwald.
Okay, so Kurt Eichenwald. Oh, my goodness. Let's see. So to segue to a good closing topic here. See if we can
Before we segue, I will say, I didn't even cover everything. There's more, but like I said, we could go another episode on this topic alone.
We'll wait till they greenlight the second season, which will be I feel like
if
it'll
they
be...
greenlight a second season...
You're going to look like Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith, and you'll just be like, no.
If they greenlight a second season, Vinny, I'm saying this here and now, you get to watch it and bring back your review.
I don't want to.
And I get to be the one who hears how awful it is.
Well,
I can't do another season. I can't. I don't have it in me.
And since Mike hasn't watched Cowboy Bebop and didn't watch it like at the time it aired, it's not going to be... Damn it. All right.
Honestly,
although now I'm going to have to watch it.
The first 6 episodes of the anime. I think it's 6. It might be 7.
Yeah.
But watch like the first 6 or 7 episodes of the anime, and you're caught up with the live action.
Well, with what should have been the live action.
With what should have been the live action, yes.
Okay, yeah, that's just a couple hours, it sounds like. So go get that done.
Right between that and all my recommendations from the waifu episode, like How Heavy Are Your Dumbbells, which Joey has now been watching.
Dude, I worked out today, and today isn't even a workout day for me, but I was like, ooh, side bends are supposed to like help with those love handles? Let me go down there and see if I'm going to get that with like 40 pounds, see how it is. worked pretty well. I liked it.
I was gonna say out of the different summaries, I think that is the one that my wife and I will watch. So
It's
we gotta
fun for
go
the
get
whole family
that
with
one
some
too.
fan service.
There might be a little not safe for Baptists in there because
Probably.
whenever they are talking about muscle groups, they're usually showing,
the location of the muscle groups.
Yes, on one of the nude girls.
Well, they
They
don't
don't show any of the
nudity,
parts. It's covered up and everything, but like they'll be showing the muscles and the arms, but like she won't be wearing a shirt or anything.
but it's PG-13 style, so it's okay.
Yeah,
It's
very,
like
very tasteful.
it's safe for progressive Baptists.
I was gonna say, I mean, where else but the Ascendant Art podcast can we get ratings?
Not
like
safe for Disney boycotting Baptists, but safe for progressive Baptists.
we're gonna create a whole new like
Rating
level of
system.
gradations here.
So we'll have Baptist safe for progressive Baptists, and like instead of RPG.
I was gonna say like our G
NC-17.
rating is gonna be VeggieTales. That's what it's gonna be.
Oh, VeggieTales is so bad, so bad.
So it's so bad for other reasons, and we'll have to
Yeah.
do an episode about that too.
You can be the expert on that one because
Yeah, because I know like I've seen snippets of VeggieTales here and there, but I know nothing of it other than that
I
there's like a
know
giant
that-
cucumber.
I know
Oh,
that
Larry
when
the
I worked at the
Cucumber.
movie theater, it came out. They made a VeggieTales movie, and it did not make very much money.
I'll say we'll just need to do that on another episode because we don't want to like clog up this episode with that whole discussion. But
I always figured that was VeggieTales was something written by like a single cat lady in her, mid-30s who just personified some of the things she took from the kitchen to the bedroom a little too much.
not quite, but
Wait, what? So I'm in the ballpark.
not quite, dude.
Oh,
Just stop,
okay.
dude. Just please stop.
Oh no! I
All
think
right,
this
anyway,
is
so
the absolute
we're gonna
end point. We have to stop now.
Yeah. We weren't going to segue to like my great question for the end of this, which is no, actually, we'll attempt to pull this one out of the garbage disposal since we're referring to VeggieTales.
Ride the tailspin. Let's keep going.
But it's this question of like, okay, so like we've been criticizing this Netflix adaptation the whole time, but let's imagine for a moment that these people actually got some sense and they're like, hey, like instead of destroying the IP and assuming the fan base will go along, let's give Vinny and Joey the budget for doing the adaptation instead. So what are some of the things that we could do to do like an adaptation or an update right?
The first question to answer is do we want to do a shot-for-shot remake, or do we want to do like I talked about earlier, which would maybe be kind of like a spin-off set within the same universe? And there's two different ways, at least I think of, for doing that. Like Mandalorian is an example of a successful show that's set within the universe. It's expanding the universe with new characters, but having callbacks to the established characters that we all like. And then the Beauty and the Beast example is what I brought up for the shot-for-shot one, where what you do is you take what are probably weak points in the story. Like honestly, like what Joey was saying, like Julia maybe was a weak point in the original story. So when you're making your shot-for-shot remake, you add depth by adding callback scenes to flesh that out. Like earlier within the show, if you're expanding the episodes to 40, 50 minutes at a time, there's no reason that you couldn't have flashbacks with Spike and Julia to flesh out the backstory that way. Like, and the anime had flashbacks and callbacks within it. So it's not even that out of the normal realm of what you were used to as a Cowboy Bebop fan. So that would be something where you could start layering in threads for the story. I mean, I think that when you do a shot-for-shot remake, the first thing you should look at is like, we need to keep the story that everybody loved, and what we should be doing is look for weak points where we can add threads in that enhance it. Give backstory to characters that were beloved, but maybe we kind of know on the background what happened,
right,
but weren't explored within the show. That's how I would approach it. I don't know if Joey would go a different route.
Well, I mean, I think I kind of already mentioned my route, which was let's just take Spike and Jet and do pre the Bebop timeline because we don't know how long they were together on the ship. Furthermore, I mean, you could theoretically do one with them just any old time because the episodes, there are arcs in the anime, but you don't know how much time elapses between one mission and the next a lot of the times. Like, They could very easily have other adventures that are kind of like sitcoms. They're kind of like a lot of standalones with some longer arcs involved in there if you want for the whole season. Furthermore, I mean, you could theoretically do like something that happened afterwards, but I can't get too into that because then we're getting into real spoiler territory. A lot of people will disagree with some of the assertions I make about the end of that series.
Absolutely, because it sounds like, because again, going back to the beginning, you said this was a kind of like one season, one shot, so 26 episodes. And so clearly more could have been done, more could have been done for adding stuff in between, more could have been done for explaining before and after. There's a lot there that could be done instead of just basically throwing it into a dumpster and letting it on fire. And really, like, that is the opportunity that got missed. You could make this a competing space opera, you could make this a competing or just like a space cowboy adventure. And unfortunately, the current guys missed it.
They could have, I mean, whew, that's the other thing too. Vinny, you said you watched a little bit of it. I will say, like, the Bebop looked amazing. Like, the ships were on point. They nailed it with the ships. And a lot of the visuals and everything were really just, mwah, they just chef's kiss. They did such a good job with them. It's the writing and the characters and everything else that was just fucked. But visually and like even the music and like a lot of the sound was all good.
And
Which actually, to me, makes it worse because those are going to be the most expensive things and the hardest things to kind of get right. So if they nailed like the visual aesthetic and the sound, because Cowboy Bebop has a very distinct soundtrack. It's different than even most animes. Like it's known for its soundtrack. But that means the writing choices to take the characters in all these terrible directions were so easily avoided because the other stuff was already going to be good. They could have,
yes,
if they just did a shot. I mean, if they just went the really easy route and did a literal shot for shot remake, they would have. I mean, there's people who probably would have not liked it, but it would have been a neutral to good, probably within the fan base.
Well, and that's one of the things too, like an interesting dichotomy. At the beginning, they did use the same song for the opening credits. It was performed by I think a different person, like updated for sound and everything, but it was the same song, and it gives you that nostalgia, and you feel really good about it. They also used the same choir song that plays when Spike goes flying out the stained glass window at the end, also updated for sound, and this time sung by I think a man instead of a woman. And unlike the beginning where I got that nostalgia feel good, they started playing that in that moment where Spike went out the window, and I was like, "Fuck you, Netflix." Fuck you. You have gone so far off script already, and you're going to use the song in a completely different context now. You're wrong, and you should not be allowed to use this song.
Yeah, so what this also tells you too, maybe this is the thing we can kind of end it on, is on the one hand, they put in all this money to get the ship right, to get all these special effects right. But the thing is, maybe what some of the modern movie makers aren't seeing is, yeah, special effects can add something to a movie, but like if the story is not right, special effects can't save it. And we have
no,
to
I don't
have
think
solid
they put all
writing.
this money in to get the ship right. They put all this money into buying the ship, and then they decided to see how many holes they could shoot in the bottom of it before it sinks.
There you go.
Yeah, it turned. They thought they were getting the QE2, and they got the Titanic.
There you go. Well, all right, guys. I think that's a good wrapping up point for this episode. So, of course, thanks for coming on again. Thanks for some great rants, and thanks for that amazing diversion right in the middle there. And I will see you guys next time
See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
on The Search. Yes.